Your resume is all about who you used to be. In your LinkedIn profile, I want you to be talking about the person you're becoming.
Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliet Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator, specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode where we are talking all things LinkedIn. And I have a really special guest for you today. Her name is Karen Yankovich and she is a go-to expert in LinkedIn. She hosts a podcast called Good Girls Get Rich. Now, don't let the title put you off. This is not just for women. It is not just about making money for yourself. What she teaches is relationship marketing using LinkedIn to be super focused about getting on the phone to people who can help you to transform and take leaps forward in whatever it is that you're strategically focusing on at work. This episode is particularly aimed at school fundraisers who are looking to develop personal relationships with more major gift prospects, so potential major donors. But I want you to also think about the other ways in which it could be used within the independent school setting. So marketing directors who are building relationships with prospective parents, people who are in charge of the commercial letting side of schools and looking for potential clients to be hiring out facilities to, anyone who's working on forging partnerships with local community leaders, local business leaders, local state schools, really useful for them as well as being a critically important part of how you develop a network for your career advancement and for your plans going forward for your career. So loads of ways that you can use Karen's tips. Now, Karen has been an expert in LinkedIn for many years. She's been quoted in the Huffington Post and Social Media Today, as well as lots of other publications. And she talks with real authority about the importance of creating a really magnetic profile within LinkedIn. So creating that credibility through your profile. We talk about how to search and find alumni that you can be connecting with, and then also how to develop that really authentic relationship with them. We talk about routines that you can get into in terms of your weekly routine, but also some really useful tips around upping your game around LinkedIn, around your events time. So using it really strategically to create an online connection with people, both before and after connecting with them at an event, either in person or virtually. So there are a lot of tips here for you to be using in your school. Really quickly, before we dive into the detail, I want to make sure that you make the most of the time you invest listening to this podcast. And the best way to do that is to make sure you grab a copy of my free ebook, The Strategic Independent School Leader. It outlines how to answer the 6 essential questions that will clarify your school strategy and secure its future. In the world of business, strategy can be full of jargon, but it doesn't have to be that way. This is a jargon-free tool tailor-made to help private school leaders think and act more strategically. Download your free copy today at www.consultjuliet.co.uk/ebook. So let's dive in and listen to my conversation with Karen Yankovich. So welcome to the Independent School Podcast, Karen. It is a delight to have you here with us today.
Juliet, I am so happy to be here with you.
So the reason I've invited you on here is because you are so committed to LinkedIn being the best way to be forging those relationships with the people that can make a really big difference to your work. So what is it that caused you to go kind of all in on LinkedIn as opposed to some of those other social media platforms? What is it that you love about LinkedIn?
Yeah. Well, like if I take this back 10 years, when I first learned, started studying digital marketing. And so when I first started using online tools to learn how to market my business, I started to help other people do the same. I was using, all the tools, Twitter and Facebook and whatever. But what my background is in sales, and my strength is always relationship sales. So even through all the other platforms that were out there, I was always bringing people back to LinkedIn and saying, this is all good, but people today want to do more about know more about the people they're doing business with. So we got to focus on LinkedIn first, and then we'll build out all these other platforms. So, and then as I started to get smarter in digital marketing and running a business, I realized that I was getting asked more and more about LinkedIn, and that the more I focused on LinkedIn, the better I was able to help people, because instead of having to learn a million different things on a million different platforms, I could really just stay focused on that.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that, probably exclusively for the past, I don't know, 5+ years, just really talking about how to use LinkedIn to build relationships, to make those higher ticket opportunities happen. Right.
Yeah.
And then, 2020 happens, and, talk about kind of like, and I'm certainly not going to say we're lucky that there was a pandemic, but kind of like where luck meets opportunity, virtual networking was all we were doing, right? Which is what LinkedIn really is. So, I was perfectly positioned to really come in and help people that were struggling to continue to grow their businesses, or because they were used to going to in-person networking events or, conferences or whatever. I was really uniquely positioned to help them not miss a beat in marketing their business, because we've got LinkedIn to fill in with that relationship building and networking, even on a virtual level.
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn is definitely my favorite social media platform. And I think what I've experienced is that you can develop a more meaningful relationship somehow. Maybe it just suits me and my work, but it feels like it is genuinely about building a relationship over time rather than pushing out lots of marketing kind of collateral out into the world and seeing what happens. And that's what resonates with me about your approach. It's not about pushing out loads of content and creating kind of a storm of activity. It's about being really targeted, about focusing on getting good content out, but then building those personal relationships and focusing on the people that can help you to just make a big leap forward in whatever your goals might be at work.
Exactly. We have the ability to build relationships with people that we only dreamed of, right? By using LinkedIn to be able to do that. So, and there's always a path, right? Somebody knows somebody that knows somebody. Those 6 degrees of separation, right? Well, LinkedIn helps us find our path to these people that we really want to build relationships with. So,
Yeah.
it is a whole lot of fun, and honestly, it is so much simpler than all of the other, cross your fingers and hope somebody sees your Facebook or hopes Facebook shows your post to some percentage of the people that are connected to you. Right. So, yeah.
So, on this podcast, we're obviously talking about independent schools, private schools. Now, there are many different ways that private schools can be using LinkedIn, but we're going to focus in a little bit our conversation today to think about schools fundraising. So, specifically, how school fundraisers can connect with alumni they wish they were connected to, who are part of their community because they are alumni, but they're not necessarily warm. So, they might be pretty cold prospects, although they have been to your school. And then developing that relationship and getting it to the point where you can get it off LinkedIn and into a video call or an in-person meeting or a phone call. And I think there are other ways that schools can use LinkedIn, but I think focusing on that one gives us a bit of a focus in on our conversation today. So I'm guessing, Karen, that the first step for people is to make sure that their personal profile and their school's page kind of information is just looking really enticing and looks really professional and credible. So do you have top tips for people on that?
Yeah. So I would say, yes, I completely agree with you that their personal profile and the schools page, the business profile needs to be great, but the majority of the emphasis really needs to be on the personal profiles, because if the personal profiles of the people involved in the fundraising on those committees or in the schools administrative offices that support that, if they all look amazing, it immediately elevates the business profile anyway.
Yeah.
Right down to the people that answer the phone, right? Because the people that answer the phone also are talking. Imagine if the person that's answering the phone when these potential investors are calling the school to speak to you and say, and then they connect with you later on LinkedIn, because that's really what LinkedIn is, right? It's about meeting people, connecting with people, following up with relationships, and they look credible, right? That's immediately going to give you a leg up, because you're now going to be, you're showing up as more professional than most of the other people your people are dealing with on a regular basis. So yeah, but so I would say lean heavily on the personal profiles, but don't, and make sure that the personal profiles are connected to the business profile, so that when people go to the business profile, they can see the list of people that work at the school and can click right through to them and find out more about them if they want. But don't just focus on the person who's making the relationship. Like, remember that there's an entire staff, and anytime if the more people that look worthy of somebody's time and money that work for that school, the easier you're making your job of getting them to invest and donate to the school.
Yeah. Now, I'm guessing that some people out there will be surprised to hear this, because a lot of people will have been thinking automatically that we're talking about a school page, about the content you're putting out on that school page. And actually, it is so much more than just a resume. It's more than a CV. So there are some people who think, I've got a job. I'm not looking for a job at the moment, so I don't really need to keep my LinkedIn profile up to date. But actually, that is not what LinkedIn is about. It is about projecting that in that personal profile, your values. Why is it important that you're fundraising? What do you have a personal connection to the cause that you're fundraising for your school? Thinking about how you're curating content
Yep.
personally as well as through your school page, and developing that credibility, but also that emotional link. Like, what are the values that come through what you're saying, and how is that going to connect with potential donors and with the cause as well?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And the reality is, it is human to human marketing. Is LinkedIn
Yeah.
is human to human marketing, right? So when if somebody reaches out to you, I mean, just think about it from yourself. Like, let's just say you're buying a car, right? And you leave the car dealership, and the salesperson reaches out to you later that day and has a completely empty LinkedIn profile. It's not going to maybe negatively impact you from buying that car, but it's certainly not going to do anything to make you be jumping out the door saying, we got to buy from this person, right?
Yeah.
But if they have a really well thought out profile where they talk about the awards that they've won and how long they've been in the business and how important it is for them to have I'm making this up, right? But how important it is for them to have a family in the right car. Now, when they make that connection, you're going to be like, oh, my money is safe in this person's hand.
Yeah.
Right. And it's on us to do that on our profile, because it's not that it's not going to necessarily hurt you if you don't have a great profile, but you are leaving so much money on the table by not doing it, because it absolutely will help you if you do.
Yeah. And it's building trust, isn't it? It's building credibility, building trust, and helping to find
Yes.
those common threads, which are the core of how you form a relationship. At least in the early days, we're programmed as humans to look for commonalities, look for threads in common. And the more that you've got on your LinkedIn page, the more someone might just spot, oh, I noticed that your holiday spot, your favorite holiday spot is the same as mine, and that's really interesting, or whatever it might be. You can be authentic.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just had a call with one of my students in my program, and we were talking about the fact that she went to her first in-person networking event in a year and a half or whatever. And I said, are you following up with them on LinkedIn? Because your profile looks great. So it's immediately going to make them, they're going to learn more about you than they learned in the in-person event anyway, just by connecting with them. But also, before you connect with them, look for something and say, wow, I knew you were a CPA, but I didn't know that you went to this college. Did you know that I go to that? I went to that, something like that, right? When you do that, you're immediately making this about the relationship and less about the pitch, right? You're on LinkedIn, so we know that it's business networking of some sort. So you don't have to lead with that. And I really want to address something you said earlier, because I think it's important, and I want to make sure we don't forget to talk about this. 10 years ago, LinkedIn really was the place for your online resume to live, but it's not that anymore. It's really, when I talk to people about what they, if I'm looking at somebody's profile together with the person whose profile it is, one of the first things that I often say is, we need to shift the energy of this profile from resume to brand. Right? It's very much like a resume. We want this to be about your personal brand. We all have a personal brand now. And I hear a lot of people say, I've LinkedIn up all day long, because when, if somebody calls me, if I have a meeting with somebody, first thing I do is check out their LinkedIn profile to see who they are, to see what I can learn about them. So we're doing that. If you look at your LinkedIn profile, everybody's got a section that says your dashboard, and it's just for everybody's profile. And it tells you how many times you came up in search appearances in the past week. If that's anything other than zero, your profile is coming up. So it's up to you to now make a great first impression so that you're
Yeah.
taking full advantage of this real estate, this online real estate that we have available to us.
Absolutely. And there are different sections and ways of doing that, aren't there? So there's the about section. I mean, these things can change over time, but utilizing all of those fields in your personal profile to be not just a list of keywords, but actually to get across the sense of who you are. And I think as well, don't be afraid. It shouldn't be completely about non-work stuff. You know, work is the center
Oh
of
yeah.
LinkedIn, but don't be afraid to put a few little personal things in, a few little quirky things, something that makes you, to get across that sense of your showing the world the real you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I had another call this morning with one of my students who said we were looking at our LinkedIn profile and I was like, we've got to humanize this. It's too bland. And then she's talking about the picture she did on top and she goes, I'm the person that I have mud on me more often than I don't. And I was like, I want to see that in your profile. She's like, what? I said, yeah, I want to see that in your profile because that tells me something about you,
Yeah,
right? And we'll find a way to weave it in, right? I want to see that in your about section somewhere because it tells me a little bit about you. It's the brand of you,
yeah.
right? It's not necessarily going to help you get or not get an opportunity, but people are going to feel like they know you and that know, like, and trust factor leads to the bigger opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think as well, when you're doing this on behalf of the school from a fundraising point of view, looking for opportunities to pull out some of those stories, some of that kind of storytelling element of your past or your passions, and linking that to your school as well. If you can find that link to what is it about, I don't know, if you're fundraising for bursaries and studentships, what is it about social mobility that really resonates with you? Is there a story from the past that you can share, or sharing the way that it makes you feel really amazing when a certain thing happens, and you see the success of what you're raising money for. And again, it's about that personal enthusiasm just coming through, so it feels like it's alive rather than just a
Yes.
kind of really limp squid piece of text that sits on a
Yeah.
website somewhere no one ever looks at.
And I will just say one more thing about the profile, and that is you really also want the energy. I don't know if you've heard the expression dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Like
Yes.
that's kind of what I want to see on your LinkedIn profile. I want you to kind of future pace it a little bit. Don't your resume is all about who you used to be. In your LinkedIn profile, I want you to be talking about the person you're becoming.
Yeah.
Like I love working with, the school and the students because I see, our future leaders and, like really, really show up like kind of picture yourself a year from now doing the thing that you dream about the most and then write it from that perspective
Yeah.
because that now elevates your brand, it elevates your energy, and you're not just talking about everything you used to be doing, right? You're really bringing people in and you're taking them with you into the future.
Absolutely. And the other thing that does is it makes sure you are not underselling yourself. And I see this a lot with the fundraising clients that I work with. And it's not just a women thing, it is men as well. And people will be so modest, and maybe it's a British thing, I don't know, so modest in their profile. And in actual fact, if you're trying to secure calls with senior people in whichever industry you're targeting for a particular campaign or particular project that you're fundraising for, you need to show them that you're worthy of their time. And yes, there will be some people who are so senior, clearly you're going to be getting your head to be having that conversation with them. You're going to be doing all the planning behind the scenes, but you need to be elevating, as you said, your profile so that you can show up in these meetings, show up in these calls in a way that respects the time of the people that you're requesting to speak to, and they can feel that it's an appropriate kind of seniority level, if you like. If you're so modest on your your LinkedIn profile, you're not cultivating that sense of being a peer or an equal to those people you're seeking to talk to.
That's exactly right. And you know what? It's not about bragging. It's more about owning all the
Yeah,
things that you've done and the accomplishments that you have and the good that you do in the world. And no one's going to think you're better than you say you are. So if you're not going to do it, you're somebody else is going to get their money.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So let's say you've got the most amazing profile, you've got your school page, you've got quality content going out, not masses, but interesting kind of posts going out there into the world. I guess the second step, which I think is probably the easiest one, is finding the people that you want to be talking to. So the LinkedIn search functionality is pretty good for schools in terms of finding alumni.
Yeah.
So as long as you're encouraging alumni to connect and have the school on their profile, I think that's actually relatively straightforward for schools. I don't know if you have any thoughts around that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that, well, I'm not going to say yes or no. Yes, I have thoughts around that. I think that, so I would consider LinkedIn Sales Navigator,
Yeah.
which is the LinkedIn premium version, because you're going to get more search functionality. And yeah, with the free version, you can find the alumni for the school and that's all you want. But when you go to Sales Navigator, you can dive in and you can find who's active on LinkedIn. What is their title? How big is the company that they own, or what, like there's so much more you can dive so much deeper into the search that you're gonna have you'll talk to less people, and it's less spinning your wheels, so your results are going to be greater. I mean, Sales Navigator is, it's an investment, but it's not a ton of money here in the US. It's $80 a month. I don't, if what you're doing isn't worth that, like if your time isn't worth that, the hours that it's going to save you. So I would consider using, at least get the free trial and check into LinkedIn Sales Navigator when you're doing these searches, because you can also save the searches, which also saves you time. And it just streamlines everything and makes it really simple to, um, to go back in and jump
Yeah.
in between all the other things you're doing.
Yeah, and if you've got that, you can make it into a regular routine. So this needs to be a weekly routine. We're going to come to that in a few moments, but not just something you go in once a quarter and figure out, how to do it again. Remember what you were searching for last time. And again, that comes back to conversations that I've had previously on this podcast about return on investment, and that sense that having some of these efficiency tools, yes, there's a cost associated with them, but if it's you using your time more efficiently, then your overall return on investment is going to be greater if you can actually subscribe to things like this that are actually going to be helpful for you in your work. So yeah, absolutely second that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So once you've found people to talk to, what do you do next? How do you recommend that people create that relationship?
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's the thing. My personal, I mean, there's lots of ways to do this. There's probably some wrong ways, but I don't know that there's any one right way. My personal process is to spend more time on research than connecting. Really find the right people, find a connection beyond just the school. I mean, obviously the school is a great connector in and of itself, right? The alumni. But if there's an additional connector, I see you're also connected to this person. Did you know that, they just got promoted or they just whatever, I'd love to be connected to you as well. Right. So beyond, and I'd rather, like, my personal process is, if you're connecting every week with 5 people, with the goal of getting on the phone with every single one of them, if you can, that's plenty, because that's going to give you tons of opportunity. Now, if you're connecting with 25 people, you're not going to do enough follow-up to get on the phone with them.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's just too many. I want you to take the number lower, but dive deeper into the research, and with the option, with the reality is you want to get on the phone with them, because, I mean, listen, my kids went to private high school, right? So I'm familiar with the process, and I know how important fundraising is for the private schools. And it's really easy for me to duck it if I want to duck it, right? But if somebody is connected with me and says, "Hey, I'm from the school," and and really genuinely looks to build a relationship with me, not only are they going to get a check from me, they're probably going to get me to volunteer for a committee or something, right?
Yeah.
Because you're building actual relationships.
Yeah.
So when you get on the phone with people, it's not that I don't want to do this. Of course I want to support the school, right? But it's just really easy for me to just take it off of my radar. But so the warmer you can make the connection, with the goal of getting on the phone with as many people as possible, not necessarily to say, will you donate, but just to say, here's what we're doing now. I'd love to hear what you're doing. Did you know that we have alumni? We feature alumni in our magazine, whatever that is, right? Like, truly bring them back into the fold of the school where you can, and not just have the person that wants to get a check from them connecting with them, but other people. Right. Let LinkedIn be a place where you're continuing to build the community of alumni, not just reach out when there's a need. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does, definitely. And this works. So I was talking to a client this morning, and completely by chance, we were talking about LinkedIn and how she had found that the people that were quicker to return her email, she's doing kind of a mini feasibility study, conversations with people about a case for support that she's developing, very early days, just to get some initial feedback. And the ones that have responded quickest were the ones that she'd developed a relationship with on LinkedIn. And it was so obvious, the connection between the two. She had taken the opportunity to just like their post, put a little comment on something. If they got a promotion, send them a little message, just using all of the functionality within LinkedIn to just be an authentic part of their network, basically. And she was doing that completely from her own perspective. She was doing it as part of the school, but it was all through her private, her individual profile.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just because she's curious about the world, wants to connect with people. And eventually they could do her a favor. They can give some feedback and hopefully, start to think about
Absolutely.
making a donation. So it absolutely works. And I love the fact that you build it into a routine. So 5 people a week. So do you have a sense of how many people you might be researching and not contacting within that? How selective are you?
Well, I mean, that really comes down to your search,
Yeah.
right? I think if you really spend some time crafting a really great search, especially on Sales Navigator where you can save it, the search actually, it doesn't really run dry because as people connect with you, their connections can become eligible for that search,
Mm-hmm.
right? Although if you're searching through alumni, then that's not necessarily the case because they're always going to be there anyway. But I think that if you're doing it in a micro targeted way and diving deeper, here's the thing. What I'd love to do is let me take a step back. If you're not using LinkedIn at all right now, your LinkedIn Messenger inbox is probably just full of junk. People pitching you, people hitting you up for things, right? It's full of crap. And that's what we think it is, right? But what I want is that inbox to be valuable to you. And when that happens when you start being more active, right? So if there's even a way, like if there's maybe there's an alumni event and you go home with a stack of business cards, start connecting with them right away. And then again, looking to get on the phone with them, because as soon as you start doing that my LinkedIn Messenger is more valuable to me than my inbox, my email inbox, because that's where the business is. That's where the opportunities are for me. So you want to start like in the beginning when you're just connecting with 5 people, that's not really happening yet, right? Because the ratio of spam to actual business is still way out of whack. So the sooner you can get to the point where your inbox is valuable, now it's going to keep you in LinkedIn more because you'll get an email about that this person just responded to you, and you'll jump into that, right?
Yeah.
So I can tell you that, and this is not because actually somebody else taught me this trick, and I didn't even, I wasn't even doing this. I run an online business. My phone blows up all day long. So of course I don't have any social media notifications on my phone at all because I would do nothing but getting notifications. But I do have LinkedIn notifications on because that's where the business is. Because if somebody emails me or messages me on LinkedIn, it means they're online. And if I'm free, I can jump right back in and respond. And now it's like a chat versus waiting for 3 days for them to come back on, right?
Yep.
So that's the kind of place you want to get to. You want to get to the place where as you start to get more active, you start to recognize how valuable those messages are. And you want to get back as soon as possible because these are real business conversations, not tweets or Facebook posts. These are real business conversations.
Absolutely.
So you want to look at it differently than you might look at your Facebook DMs or your Twitter DMs.
I completely get it. And there's something about that immediacy of responding immediately and then getting a response back. And it does turn into a kind of a live chat.
Yep.
And what I've noticed is that for my business, I'm guessing very much around alumni events as well, is that this peaks around event time. So I can see how there could be a really useful workflow that you, as a school fundraiser, you and your team can build into. Okay, we've got an alumni event coming up. We've got the list of people who are booked in for that event. And then going through and actually connecting with people in advance.
Yes.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing you, really excited.
I love that you're saying connect in advance.
Yeah,
because that
absolutely.
is something people don't do. And it's so powerful.
And do it at professional conferences as well, because it's really powerful, especially if you're connecting to the speakers and saying, I'm really looking forward to hear you speak. You don't have to say much more than that. They're thrilled to know there's going to be someone enthusiastic in the audience.
I know. I mean, I speak on LinkedIn and that doesn't I have a stack of $5 gift cards to a coffee shop here in the US that I bring with me to conferences, and I give them to people that connected with me ahead of time just to like make a point in the conference. Like when I'm doing the talk, I'm like, okay, where's these 2 people? If I give away, even in a year where we're doing conferences, if I do 10 a year, that's a lot. Wow. So people are not doing this. If you are the one connecting ahead of time, they will remember you and they'll also appreciate you, because here's the thing. Very often when they go to an alumni event, they're like, oh, am I going to know anyone? Who am I going to know? Who am I going to talk to? Like you can schedule ahead of time. Hey, let's meet up at 8:00 at this corner and have a cup of coffee and, get to know each other a little bit more.
Absolutely.
They appreciate that because now they're going and they've already got organized plans
Yep.
as opposed to showing up and wandering around, like wondering what they should do and who they should talk to.
Completely. And what I found worked really well is if you combine that with your previous tip about making that message a bit more personal, finding another connection,
Mhm.
it means that when you start that conversation, and as fundraisers, we're very good at looking around the room, trying to find the people that we want to speak to at that event. Kind of, you've got the photo of kind of the memory of the photo in your head, you're trying to spot the person. And if you know that the first thing you can say was, it was great to connect with you on LinkedIn, and then continue something that you'd already started to find one of those personal connections that's something beyond just the school, you've just jumped forward about 5 stages of that know, like, and trust process.
Absolutely. And what's going to happen too, if you're doing that ahead of time, when you do meet up with somebody, and even if it's somebody you just bump into and you're like, hey, my name's Karen, and they introduce themselves, they'll say, oh, I know you, we're connected on LinkedIn.
Exactly.
So you're already, you've already established a connection,
Yeah,
where that's not the case with most of the other people in the room.
definitely.
So powerful.
And then to have a little bit of a workflow as a team as well on the post-event follow-up. So you mentioned before, if you can, obviously, hopefully you've already connected, but if they didn't accept the connection, then kind of resend that message. And then you've got something to talk about. Either, I was really hoping to have a chat to you, I didn't bump into you, create some kind of common bond, and then let's jump on a phone call or a video call instead. And quite often when you haven't had the chance to bump into people naturally at an in-person event, or even at a virtual event where there's random breakout groups and things, you didn't end up with the people you wanted to be with, that can be really powerful, because people are, oh, someone was looking out for me, they didn't see me, yeah, let's
Yes.
jump on that call, that sounds
Yeah.
good. So again, it's about using these in-person and online opportunities, combining them together. I think there's a real power in that.
Yeah. And one of the tips that I have too is, if you have an event coming up, let's say your event is on Wednesday, block an hour on Thursday to do this.
Oh
When
yes,
you
absolutely.
block the event, because you want to be intentional about that follow-up, because you know what your day, what your calendar can look like, and then 2 weeks go by and you've missed the opportunity.
Yeah.
Block time after the event to do this. In fact, if I'm speaking at a conference, I typically take a late flight out the next day, because I'm locked in a hotel room and I can spend that next morning doing all the conference follow-up, because once I get back into my life, it's so much harder to do. So don't, part of this is intentionally scheduling the follow-up on LinkedIn after a conference.
And that neatly links to one of the other podcast episodes that's coming out a few weeks before this one, about time blocking and actually making those intentional decisions about what's important. So really, really useful tip, definitely. And I also find if you can do it straight away before you dive into other things, you remember more of the conversation, and there's a certain amount of memory bank that I have. If it gets used up by diving into another piece of work first, that's it, that information is just lost. So using that time immediately afterwards, it can make it much more effective in remembering those little anecdotes or little comments that people made in the conversation. So
Yeah. And if you have the opportunity, I mean, listen, if it's virtual, I mean, I was really loving some of this virtual networking, because you can have a notebook in front of you and you could
yeah,
make a note that says, I'm taking a trip to Germany next month, or kid just graduated high school or college or whatever, right? So you can make those notes, which just gives you something to talk about when you do that follow up, right? But you can also do that even on the back of a business card if you need to. Just take little notes that when you connect with them the next day, you've got something personal that even if you don't use that in the connection request,
yeah,
how fun is it to say, great to meet you last night, John, looking forward to staying connected. And then in 2 weeks saying, hey, I was thinking about you. Wasn't last night your event? How'd
yeah,
that go?
exactly.
Like,
So
how
powerful.
amazing is that?
Yeah,
Right. So you can do that. Like, that's why I like to do this in such a micro targeted way, because you can't do that times 100, but you can
yeah.
do that times 5.
And what I love is that now I can do those notes when no one can see me under the webcam camera of a virtual event. What I
Yes.
used to do in real
Yes.
events was have a little mini notebook with me, and I'd allow myself kind of 3 or 4 conversations around the room. So it wouldn't be dashing out the room all the time, but I'd walk out in the direction of the bathrooms. But I wouldn't be going to the bathroom. I'd find a quiet corner, jot down 3 or 4 words for each person I'd met, and then return to the room, and do 3 or 4 conversations, because that was my memory limit, basically. So it's so much easier actually for virtual events to have that notebook in front of you.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And you probably can follow up with more people too.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to be able to talk to 25 people at an in-person event, but even if you don't speak to them all at a virtual event, you've heard them introduce themselves, and you can say, you can take notes about that.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, I know one of the things I've heard you talk about before is that LinkedIn is fantastic, but the aim is to get the conversation off LinkedIn at some point and onto a phone or video call. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on when is the right time to do that. Is it just instinct or?
It is instinct. And I will tell you that my strategies are getting shorter and shorter on that. Nobody has time for BS conversation
Yeah.
that you're doing. Like, thought you might like this article that I found. And then 2 days later said, like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to do those. And you don't have time to read that. And the other thing too is, as valuable as the piece of content you think that I should read might be, I'm probably not going to read it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm probably not going to read it because I'm busy. So put yourself on the other side of that, right? The warmer the research will allow you to make the connection as warm as possible. The warmer the initial connection, the quicker you can go to the conversation. If you can, obviously the alumni is a great warm to begin with. I mean, that's probably enough to just go to a conversation right after that. But I would caution leading with fundraising, even though
Absolutely.
they know that's coming,
Yeah. Yeah.
but think what else you can lead with, and then just say, I just, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
We've got this event coming up, or, whatever you can think of, whatever kind of conversation you can think of. Your goal is to literally try to get them on the phone in a way that is just true. Like, we love to connect. I love, you can even say, I make it my business to try to have 5 phone calls a week with alumni so that I know what's going on, what they're doing, and we know who we can feature. Like, you can even just say that,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love to hear what's going on. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. And all good school fundraising programs are based on a real strong engagement program. So there should be plenty of opportunities within your current program,
Right.
whether that's careers mentoring, careers talks, profiles in magazines, little kind of shorter kind of testimonials or profiles on your website, whatever it might be. You should have a little stack of opportunities that you can pick from to get people initially, and then authentic. You're not just using these as an excuse to talk about fundraising. You genuinely want them as valued members of your community. And I think the other thing that's really important is thinking, what value are you going to be offering them in that call? So
Oh, you were reading my mind.
is it, so for some people, okay, great. So for some people, perhaps a stereotype, but perhaps of the older generation, that opportunity to reminisce and kind of talk about the good old days, maybe that's the value they're taking from the conversation. For others, maybe it's a careers network that they never really thought about tapping into, and you're their gateway to make a recommendation. Oh, have you spoken to so-and-so? They could be really interested in having a conversation and making that introduction. Whatever it is, there has to be something in it from them as well, because this is about a reciprocal relationship. And at some point, that reciprocal relationship will hopefully include a donation to your school for whatever cause is your strategic priority, but it has to be two-way. And before you get to the point of talking about a donation, there's already give and take, and that's how it develops into that trusting relationship. So
Well, and,
important.
here's another great way to get quickly to a phone call. You can also say, you know, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, so you got to do a better job than this. But you can say something like, I like to, my goal is to talk to 5 alumni each week because I want to know what you look for, what would help you be
Yes.
more successful in your business, because I love nothing more than connecting 2 of our alumni to support each other.
Perfect.
But the only way for me to do that is to talk to you first, so I understand what would be helpful to you.
Yep.
Are you looking for media opportunities? Are you looking for clients? Are you looking for a job? Are you looking to retire? Are you looking for an intern? Right? Like, what's on your immediate horizon that, you'd be looking for some help with, and let me know. And I'll, if I
Yeah.
can help you, I love to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And again, it's coming from an authentic place, because if you've got that alumni relations engagement, there's no point doing loads of stuff that people don't care about. You need to be doing the stuff that people need. So the more you're on the phone, you're getting that. It's almost like market
Yes.
research to tell you what those people need. And if these people are also, as probably, because we've set this up to talk about potential major donors, if these people are the key potential major donors, then understanding what they need is really important. It might be quite different to other groups within your alumni who are asking more noisily and proactively for something quite different. So really reaching out to those people and understanding what they want in that segment of your audience.
Yeah. And, you may find things out that you would never have known otherwise. Like, my company's opening a new location in Switzerland and I'm going to head it up and I'm moving to Switzerland. And you can say, wow, you know what? We have this alumni who lives in Switzerland. I'd love to connect you to them.
Precisely.
Right. Maybe they can, right. Like, so you never know, like that isn't something you would necessarily know otherwise. Right. So it isn't always about like, until the beauty of this, and this is also sometimes the difficult part, but the beauty of this is you need to go into this with no expectations of how the conversation is going to go.
Yes.
Right. You just have to be open to where it goes and then just go in that direction. We're so used to having scripted sales conversations or scripted fundraising conversations. These conversations, the less scripted, the better. The more you just open up to taking notes. What are they doing? What would be valuable to them? What's going on in their life? How can you help them? The more opportunities you're going to find.
Absolutely.
Right. When you're just opening it up to where it goes. And that's a skill, right? It's a skill you have to, but if listen, if you're in that role at a school, then I would like to think you've got some skill in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. These are genuinely people who are confident talking to people, but have that sense of doing good in the world. They want to fundraise for something that's going to make a real passionate difference to people. So Karen, it has been fantastic to have your time today to talk about LinkedIn. So I'd love you to share with us how you help people to up their game on LinkedIn. How can people reach you if they're interested in hearing a bit more?
Yeah. Well, first of all, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Karen Yankovich across all social media platforms, but you can find me on LinkedIn at Karen Yankovich. Let me know this is where we met so that I know why you're connecting with me. It's always a good way to build relationships, right? Connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have a podcast called Good Girls Get Rich. It's, got a lot of LinkedIn and relationship building tips. And my website's KarenYankovich.com. There's lots of stuff there, but the podcast is probably a way to just learn a little bit more about this. Yeah. But if you're connected to me on LinkedIn and you want to chat with me about anything, I'm happy to do that. So just let me know.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I can big thumbs up for the podcast. Good Girls Get Rich. I'll link to it in the episode notes. For a British audience, don't worry if you're not a girl. It's not just for girls. It's about relationships. That's so right. There's a sense of it being for women. You're going to get something out of it regardless. And it's not just about getting rich from your own pocket. If you're not a business owner, you're still going to get something out of this because it's about that authentic relationship, and relationship marketing is the core of fundraising.
It's really about building abundance, an abundance into everything you do with these relationships. So
absolutely. Thank you for your time, Karen. It has been a pleasure to talk to you, and have a fantastic week.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.